Welcome to Chain Reaction, the Foreign Policy Research Institute's flagship network of podcast series examining the political, security, economic, and social trends shaping Europe and Eurasia. Throughout the year, we're talking with experts about developments in Russia's war in Ukraine, the new European security order, the past, present, and future of the Baltic states, Russia's political economy, and great power competition in the region. Join us each month for
Bear Market Brief,
Baltic Ways,
Report in Short,
and of course, our flagship, Chain Reaction. New episodes are available each week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. This week on the continent.
These days, the continent is more of an irregular podcast. Over our first 2 seasons, we covered a lot of ground, and of late, the episodes have been few and far between. However, every now and again, events transpire that make it downright impossible for me not to do an episode. And on this episode, we're going to talk about one such event. I'm Aaron Schwartzbaum, and this is The Continent, a podcast about politics, society, and security in Europe in the wake of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. As you may have guessed from the title, this time we're returning to Serbia. In mid-March, a single day of protests against the Serbian government saw a turnout of give or take 300,000 people. Now, to my American ear, that's not a huge number, but that's actually about 5% of Serbia's entire population. You heard me right. That's 1 in 20 Serbians turning out to protest on the same day. Let me drive this home further. Here in the United States, the largest single-day protest I can remember was the 2017 Women's March, and that, at the very most, saw 1.5% of the U.S. population protest. What we just saw in Serbia was huge. So what I want to know is, how do you get that many people to become politically engaged in the same activity on the same day? Joining to help in that effort is Mladen Mrdal. Mladen earned his PhD in political science from Northeastern University in Boston and is currently a lecturer at the Wenzhou Keian University in China. Since 2010, he has co-led Northeastern's Dialogue of Civilizations summer program in the Balkans. In 2016, Mladen returned to Serbia and became involved with the Center for International Relations and Sustainable Development. In 2019, he transitioned back to full-time teaching at the International Burg University in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, before moving to Webster University in Tashkent, Uzbekistan in 2020. He is a frequent commentator on Serbian, regional, and international politics, both for TV and print media. Now, all of the conversations I have on the continent are great, but I really enjoyed this one. We really got into the intersection of politics and culture and language and what it all means. I hope you enjoy. Mladen, welcome back to the continent. Great to have you with us again. Just to remind our listeners, could you quickly reintroduce yourself?
Hi, Aaron. Great to be on your show again. I'm from Serbia originally, did my PhD in Boston at Northeastern. Afterwards, I worked a little bit in Serbia for some politicians, went back to teaching, some exotic places like Uzbekistan, and currently I'm in China. But most of the last year I spent in Serbia, so I was there when the whole protest movement started and the whole thing happened.
And that is rather the topic of our episode today. And it's been really fascinating to watch. So I want to start, actually, before we even get to the events of mid-March and this massive, massive protest, I want to start with the events that kicked this all off, the tragedy in Novi Sad, which was, I want to say, November 2024. So about a year and a half ago. So first off, before we even talk about the specific events, I have not been to Serbia, and I would imagine many of our listeners have not been either. So as a Serbian, when you hear Novi Sad, what is that place like? What jumps to mind when you think about the city?
Well, Novi Sad is compared often to be like Boston of Serbia. If Belgrade is like New York of Serbia, then Novi Sad is like Boston of Serbia. So it's a place that used to be, it developed in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So it has a very obvious Central European architecture. People in Novi Sad are, well, at least they used to be known as very calm, easygoing. Well, that's the difference with, Bostonians, but there you go. It used to be known also as a Serbian Athens, like the place where Serbs had their educational institutions, the merchant class, while the rest of Serbia was under Ottoman Empire. It's a city that's pretty flat, but nearby there's a huge hill, or we call it a mountain, but it's a flatland, so it's a big hill with a very huge Austrian fortress. So it's a beautiful place to live. It's a very, very, very cool city, but because of the wars of the 1990s, there's a ton of refugees from Croatia, Bosnia, Kosovo, Serbs primarily, who found their new home there. So Novi Sad is now a city that's getting faster, getting more aggressive, I would say. And, it's part of the whole post-communist transition. So you have it all put together, and it's quite an interesting place.
Sounds dynamic. I will assuredly have to add it to my travel lists. So let's, though, talk about the unfortunate events of November 2024. So it was, as best I read and understand, the collapse at a rail station. I think it was like an overhang over the platform. I want to say it was like 16 people died. Tragedy, especially in a country of like 6.5 or so million people. That's a pretty horrific event. I understand the grief surrounding that completely. That I don't think the listeners need to they can hear about it, but I don't think that needs to be explained. What I am curious about is the ensuing anger afterwards. So it was a tragedy. Why did it touch a nerve?
Well, here's the thing. We can get into the business of it, rather to say corruption of it, and its international context, which is also important. But let me put it this way. I shy away usually from resorting to culture as an explanation. The situation is more complex than that. But there is one thing that I noticed about my people, and that's that they are ready to, they're ready to not get into confrontation if that's the easier way to go. They're keen on avoiding confrontation as much as possible, even though there is obvious injustice going on, but they try to get away from trouble. At certain points, when we have a saying that goes something like this. The yellow minute. That's I don't know how it got into Serbian language, but when somebody goes berserk, we say that guy he got into his yellow minute, like žuta minuta. It kind of rhymes, and that means that there's no stopping anymore. There's confrontation all the way. So from nothing to everything immediately. So this is something that I recognize in this case. This is not the first time we have a tragedy that took lives. And every time something like that happened before, the response was lukewarm. There were a couple of demonstrations that seemed big, protests against similar events before, but they kind of died out after 6 months to a year of protesting, walking around, and then people disperse and go home, nothing big. So this is not the first incident of this kind. We had a helicopter crash that was most likely result of some ministers ordering the pilot to land at an airport which was not appropriate for that pilot to land, so that ministers could go and take a photo shoot with the baby that was supposed to be saved with that helicopter intervention. So we had coal miners dying in a coal mine accident, which was obviously a result of neglect of the safety standards. We had a politician whose head was smashed by government thugs. And we had mass shootings in our school, which was the first time ever that it happened in our country. And we did have some protests related to these tragedies, but they kind of died out and they were not so impressive. This time, people just realized that this is not going to stop. This is not going to go away. This is systemic. This is the result of systemic corruption that is going to take more lives. And this time, maybe, it is also that we have a new generation of youngsters, students, who have no hesitation to call things as they are. And they were really instrumental in making this protest so big and so nationwide. And this has been the biggest challenge to our corrupt government ever since it got to power. So it's in the past 13 years. So this is accumulation of anger and desperation.
So this started, though, I think there's two threads I want to pull on here. So this started before, 5% of the entire country turned out. This started mostly as a student movement. That's correct?
Well, it was a mix of politicians, opposition politicians reacting to the tragedy because, that's what they do. I mean, that's a job. That's the idea of liberal democracy, because if incumbents make a mess, the opposition parties are going to use it and invite people to vote for them. And that's how it's supposed to be. But because of the bad record the opposition parties have and the systemic demonization of opposition by the media under control of the ruling party, which is most of the media in the country, the opposition does not really have great credibility among the people. So when students were added to this pot that's been simmering, then the explosion happened, because students are considered, rightfully so, to be clean. Their motives are clean. They have no a record of any, corruption. I mean, they're kids. They're college students. I mean, their motivation is not in question. They are, so to say, credible, and everybody kind of understands that if these kids are up in arms against obvious corruption and incompetence and honestly speaking, criminal behavior of the government, that must be good. That must be supported. So this was the secret ingredient, not so secret ingredient, but this trust that people have in the motives of students really pulled people to that movement and out in the streets.
So you're talking about corruption and talking about the international context. Let's talk a little bit about that surrounding the tragedy that kicked this off in the first place. So, accidents happen, but it sounds like there was negligence here from your tone of voice and from what I've read in the news too. So tell me about why did this become a corruption issue versus just one-off tragedy?
Yeah, it's not just negligence. It's criminal. It's we don't care kind of attitude. So let's talk about the basics. So Serbia is kind of a bridge between Greece and Hungary. And as such, it's important for Chinese infrastructure. Chinese have leased two great ports in Greece, Athens and Thessaloniki, and they need to connect it with Hungary and with Central European markets. Hungary has been a good partner to to China, and the Chinese want to build a high-speed railway connecting Greek ports and Hungary and further Central European markets. So Serbia becomes important in this context, and Serbian government obviously partnered with China to invest, to build this infrastructure. Of course, there's a ton of money coming in. Where there's a ton of money, there's a ton of opportunities for corruption, and especially when politicians are super corrupt, that's great for them. So what happened was that a Chinese company was working on the restructuring of our railway system and rebuilding that railway station in Novi Sad. But it seems that our government kind of pushed Chinese toward getting subcontractors who were to be local companies. But these local companies are run by criminals, like real criminals, who are in bed with the government. And it's not enough to have one kind of layer of these criminal companies. But then subcontractors, they hire subcontractors. And subcontractors, they hire subcontractors. So there's been like 7 layers of these companies, all connected with the ruling party, that were siphoning the money out of the project. So we ended up with having 65, I think, million euros spent on reconstruction of a railway station that was supposed to be, conducted, paid for with a ton of much less money than that. There were some comparisons about renovation of some train stations in Austria and in Europe. And it's just staggering how much more money was spent on this one. So the companies that did it did a bad job. They did not study the statics of the whole structure, and after some time the thing collapsed. It collapsed before all the paperwork was finished. So it was officially let into use in a grand ceremony attended by high government officials, to show to people how they are, rebuilding the country and all that, even though the paperwork wasn't finished. So this all just points into the direction of the government, not just in terms of, corruption, but the job was well done. So corruption was enormous. The job was not done well. And this time, 16 people died because of that. So this is the big picture: corruption plus international infrastructural projects, and all of that put into context of our government, Serbian government, enjoying support both by the EU countries and the US, previous administration and the current one. So the protest that erupted against the government actually does not have very favorable international context to rely on. And that's the tragedy of the present moment.
So one of the things I'm really curious about is what I would call the contagion moment. So we have a core of students who continued protesting, weekly over the course of a year plus?
No.
But it's the moment.
Just to correct you, I'm sorry. The tragedy happened on November 1st last year. So it's been November 1st, December 1st, January.
Sorry, half
1st.
a year then.
Yeah, almost half a year.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Confused with dates. Need more coffee before. But so they've been protesting 6 months. But there's a difference between the kind of core of the protest movement continuing and then an event wherein, again, 5% of the entire country turned out. And just to share an anecdote, this involves U.S. politics, but to listeners, I'm not trying to convince you of anything, just sharing what this may look like in practice. In Washington, D.C., when Black Lives Matter protests broke out in 2020, I was initially on the sidelines just watching events unfold. And then there was the incident in Lafayette Square where then President and current President Trump ordered the tear gassing of protesters. And the next day, I felt motivated to go, as did many people I know, because of that, on top of the initial protests in social context. So that was the moments where people who had not previously been mobilized then joined the protest movement. So I'm curious what happened in the Serbian context here. So core of protesters, how do we get from the students to 5% of everybody in the country?
Well, maybe it was even more than 5%, because in the biggest rally on March 15th, there was more than 500,000 people for sure, because just in the downtown, it was calculated that there was about 300,000 people, maybe even more. But in the rest of Belgrade, there were a lot of people who just did not want to risk going downtown. So they were walking around in the different parts of Belgrade. And I know personally a lot of people like that who did not, especially older people, who did not want to go into the crowds of the downtown. So honestly speaking, I think it was about 500,000 people in total in all of Belgrade, in a country that is like over 6 million people, 6.5 at best.
So at least 5% makes the number even more impressive.
Yeah. So it was the biggest rally ever. And the thing was that it was the hype was created by student marches. So students were walking from one big city to another big city, and they showed really the blisters. They showed the bloody feet that they got on these marches. I mean, we're talking about kids who were, a lot of them were not pretty athletic before. I mean, they were just students, and then they decide to show some kind of determination, like some kind of a martyrdom, that they want to wake up the whole country. So people were really touched with the symbolics of all that. So there was a huge protest in Novi Sad. There was a huge protest in central Serbia. There was a huge protest in southern Serbia. Students from a predominantly Muslim part of Serbia were also involved. This was like breaking down all these interfaith barriers, interethnic barriers. Like, they were greeted. I mean, the students from this Muslim-dominated part of Serbia, they had a separate place for worship that was organized by students from other parts of Serbia, which is really something that touched a lot of people that still are suffering because of our intercommunal violence in the wars of the 1990s. So that really gave a lot of hope to people. So when the culmination was that meeting in Belgrade on March 15, that's why people from all over Serbia came, because it was the place to be. If you did not go there, like, you were missing out on something historic. And the hopes were so huge that some people were really disappointed when after that rally, the government was not removed from power. Like that just like illustrates how big of the hype was at that time. And after that huge meeting that we never saw anything like that, there was a really serious question. Now what?
I think that becomes our question now.
Yeah, and also I would like to not to miss to point this out. During every meeting, anywhere in small towns, villages, or big cities, there's some sort of commemoration for the victims of the tragedy, and people just stand in silence. They put their cell phones torch on to commemorate the 16 victims. So people stand in silence for 16 minutes. And at that time, toward the end of the 16 minutes of silence, government used something that we call the sound cannon, some sort of acoustic weapon that created a huge panic among the people. But luckily, people did not go into stampede. And right at the time when that weapon was used, there were some firecrackers that were thrown from some buildings surrounding the downtown by the operatives of the ruling party, and all points out to the intention of the government to create a stampede that would then discredit the whole movement, that would show to the whole country and the world that this protest is self-destructive, it's self-defeating, it's violent, as people cannot keep peace among themselves. And it's really a wonder that nobody got killed. We have footage of it. It's been analyzed. Government lied at first that they don't have a weapon like that. Then they admitted that they do, but they didn't use it. It's just lie after a lie after a lie, and it's clear that their intention, at least I have no doubt about it, that their intention was to create a stampede in which protesters would kill each other by running into different directions, and that would discredit the whole movement. So we are dealing with we're not dealing with the usual corrupt politicians. We're dealing with criminals who are acting as a political party. And a mix of it.
One of the, I guess, dynamics, just hearing that story, and I saw some footage surrounding the protest of the use of that technology and weapon. That, I imagine, likely inflamed passions among the protesters more. Are there future marches planned in your kind of read?
Well, yeah. The initially students started protest and they based their protest on 4 demands. One demand to publish all documentation related to the reconstruction of the railway station. Another demand was that people will be prosecuted who were attacking students in the first wave of protest, and so on. There were 2 other demands more. After that attack, students just added another point to their list of demands, and that's to the investigation of who used that weapon, and for those people to be punished. So it's just the opposite that government created. Now they're more defiant. The next step that students are taking is to have a delegation that is riding on the bikes to Strasbourg, to the EU, and to demand from EU support. And this is going to be a bit embarrassing for the EU officials because they really do not show signs of wanting to put pressure on our government. Why is that so? Serbia has a ton of lithium. German companies are expecting that lithium to support their electric vehicles production. Now there are some reports that they are giving up on that because of the strong resistance of the Serbian public. Serbian government has been supplying weapons to Ukraine and to Israel, which bought them some support from the West as well. Serbia is important for infrastructural connections And Serbian leader, the president, Vučić, has been very compliant with that. He has also been giving up on Serbian sovereignty in Kosovo, which is, apple of discord. It's a very hot issue, the status of Kosovo. So pretty much we have a understanding that the Western countries are getting something important from him, and in exchange they tolerate his rising dictatorship, autocracy that is rising into a dictatorship.
So I have a question relating to Vučić's presidency. So in the world as a whole, zooming out here, this is, I think, safe to say, kind of a high watermark so far for right-wing populism, which is ostensibly the category I hear Vučić looped in with. I don't know exactly how accurate that is, but this is, I think, the most influence with the second Trump administration that this kind of intellectual political movement globally has had. And yet, at the same time, it seems to me like he's in a bit of trouble. So would you agree with that? Is that the case? Is this a meaningful threat to his continued rule and presidency?
Well, this is kind of tragic and funny at the same time. The government, his regime lost credibility. They're losing credibility every day. But the opposition parties are not getting any credibility. And students who enjoy really high credibility are still rejecting to enter party politics. So they are politically active in terms of, protesting for some political change and all that, but they are not going to, register a political party and go for elections, because we still do have elections, even though they're heavily skewed toward the ruling parties. So this is kind of like Lenin said, the power is rolling in the streets, the authority is rolling in the streets, and somebody needs to pick it up. Like the credibility in Serbian politics is rolling down in the streets, and somebody needs to pick it up. Like the government cannot do it, opposition parties cannot do it, and students who can do it, they don't want to, exchange that credibility into political party ambition to become like a ruling party. So that's one tragedy. Vučić is everything to everyone. He's like he's running a catch-all party. So when Democrats were in power, he kind of tried pinkwashing the. I think that's the term. So he appointed an open LGBT person as the prime minister of Serbia. And even though LGBT people are really not enjoying like high level of security in Vučić Serbia, I mean the Pride Parade is often banned, and they've been attacked, and police even attacks them without a punishment from the government. So it's really not great to be an LGBT person in Serbia. But he appointed an LGBT person, the prime minister, to show to the Western liberals how great he is. And then he sends to Russia people who are extremely pro-Russian. When he was expecting Hillary Clinton was going to win elections, he, partnered up with Bill Clinton, the guy who, literally led bombing of Serbia and is most hated person in Serbia. So he's everything to everyone. He will promise everything. He will do everything as long as you support him. So is he a right-wing guy? Intimately, I think he is. But if he needs your support, he will be whatever you need him to be. He's just an opportunistic criminal guy who just wants power, and that's it.
So I guess the final question then we arrive at is, what's next? We talk about the bicycle protests, but are there elections on the horizon? Where does this leave Serbia at the current moment?
Well, currently it's not very good for Vučić to have elections, because there can be very emotional protest vote that will be very hard to put to contain, and to somehow secure majority for him. Vučić has a junior partner. It's a Socialist Party of Serbia. They are notoriously hard to trust because they betrayed the pro-Western liberal parties before, and they ganged up with Vučić against them. So they can do the same to Vučić. So, he can never be sure about them. So he's going to prolong having elections, I believe, until 2027, until he stabilizes the country and secures foreign support from outside. The biggest problem is what happens with the opposition parties, what happens with students. Because if they do not present a united front, if they do not prepare for next elections as a united front, he's going to chop them into pieces. He has the history of using fake opposition parties to break the opposition front. Students really don't know now what to do and how to proceed because, short of a violent revolution, which, nobody wants still, and which most likely would not succeed, it's very hard to figure out what to do. So it's really a stalemate. And whenever there's a stalemate, the trend is in favor of the incumbent, and I'm afraid that's Vučić. So I think I wish I was wrong, but I think we're going to see this inertia prolonged until 2027, and then we will see what will happen.
Last question. So I love asking guests on the continent for words and or phrases in the local language that are relevant in the current moment. You said there's a whole dictionary these students have created. Are there any favorites, or is there a top favorite of yours that you think would be indicative of the energy and feeling of the moment?
Oh my God. So most definitely the word of the protest is pumpai, which is imperative of to pump. So keep pumping. That's the message. So pumpai means go out, protest, shout, scream, participate, do whatever you can, because we need to pump until this regime explodes. And now when people feel more confident about themselves than they used to before, now we have another one that's like dinstai, and it's also imperative of the verb to I guess to fry would be or something like that. So it's like when you're frying a meat and you throw it on a pan and you look at it like simmering there. So that's the word. But I guess one last word that I would share with your audience is the word chaci, which is it was a funny mistake by a pro-government activist who actually protested against students blocking the universities, and he wrote a graffiti that said it was supposed to say students go back to school, but the word student he misspelled. So instead of the word đaci, which is a different first letter, he wrote chaci. So it's like saying pupils instead of pupils, like N instead of L. So now the whole Serbia is calling pro-government activists chaci, like pupins instead of pupils, and that became like a word. So it's a big slur now to call someone chaci. It means like you're a paid government activist who is ready to do anything for money. And then president tried to defend that word. So he printed out T-shirts. So you can see President of Serbia wearing a T-shirt saying "I am chaci," which means like I'm pupin. Like it's appropriating this misspelled word to defend his followers, to raise their spirits. So there's a ton of this kind of words that are now used by both sides, and I wish students could capitalize on their greater imagination, because they really make a lot of fun of it. It's really really cool to see how they're navigating this narrative wars. But if only they could get some more help from outside, some more pressure on the government, that is critical at this moment.
Mladen, thank you for coming back. This was really illustrative and illuminating for me, so very appreciative.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Mladen, and to you, dear listener, for joining. The question I want to leave you with is whether you think this movement in Serbia has momentum, but more broadly, whether such a magnitude of turnout is possible in your country. The Continent Podcast is a project of the Foreign Policy Research Institute, that's FPRI, a nonpartisan think tank based in Philadelphia. For more information on this initiative and on many others, visit fpri.org. We'll catch you next time.